Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Af Malhotra on Straight Talk with Af. My guest today is an outstanding author, a diplomat, a creative thinker, a rule breaker, a maverick, and many, many other things that he will call himself. Much like me, he is also into music, and most recently did a stint in the UK where he was the Minister for Culture and Education and the director at the Nehru Centre, the famous Nehru Centre, where, as you probably know, I've been playing tabla since I was the age of 16 and had many, many shows there. So I have a nostalgic connection to Amish. We met briefly in London, but only for a little bit of time. So Amish Tripathi, welcome to Straight Talk with Af. What a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolute pleasure being here, Af. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I just wanted to give the audience a bit of a context. So a lot of our audience, Amish, is from the UK and the US. And so this is a slightly different audience for you in the sense that we have less people from India, but we do have people from the diaspora in the UK and the US. So they know you, they know your work. And for those who don't know Amish, he is a superb author. 6.5 million copies of his books have been sold, 11 books now, the most recent one that we're going to talk about today as well. And I love the way he thinks. I saw him recently at the Jaipur Lit Fest in London, where you were having a conversation with Shashi Tharoor, who I've had on the show in the past, literally a week before you had a discussion with him. And I love the way you carried out that conversation. You're both prolific writers. And I've just started to read some of your work. So forgive me, I haven't been exposed to your work like many others. I'm just starting to understand and appreciate your work, and it's truly brilliant. And being a father of young children as well, I think this is so powerful, your work. So today I wanted to firstly start with, Amish, I wanted to start with a bit about you and your background. For those who don't know who Amish Tripathi is, you're currently based in Mumbai. You've just moved back to Mumbai from London. Tell us a bit about your personal journey, your story. I know it's filled with ups and setbacks, and struggle is where the learning is, and I can totally relate to that too. But we've both had I've had a tough 7 years or 8 years. I don't know about you, but I certainly see from all the podcasts, it's been a hard 7 years for you on a personal level, losses and trauma, and I've faced something similar at a personal level too. And we'll talk about grief in a moment. But firstly, how did you get into writing books? Because I know your career started somewhere else. Tell us a little bit about Amish.
I've had 4 careers in one life, essentially. So I grew up, I've been an India boy all my life. I mean, this recent tenure in London was the first time I lived abroad. So I've traveled a great deal abroad. I have done work for short tenures abroad, but I've never lived abroad. I've always been an India boy. I come from a humble family. I've never hidden that. I always speak of it very proudly. And therefore, because when we were growing up, we were always pragmatic in our career choices. There were 4 siblings, and our parents. I mean, I think the only investment they ever made was the education of the 4 of us. They didn't really have anything else. They gave us an education that was way beyond their income and social class. And the expectation from us, a very fair expectation, they never hid their sacrifices. And Ma used to always tell us, whatever you guys do, you have to be number one, because your parents have made huge sacrifices for you, and the best way you can pay it back is be successful, be happy, be successful. So therefore, obviously, all 4 of us made pragmatic career choices. So I loved history as a kid. In the India, I'm nearly 50. So the India I was growing up in, this was of course the days of socialism, when we had destroyed our economy by our own choices. History and all were not wise career choices in those days. These days, you can make money through any route, even by being an author. Those days, not so much. So I did the practical thing. I did an MBA. I was a banker for 14 years. And then an idea occurred to me for a book series. I started writing that. I wrote my first 2 books along with my job. Like I said, humble background, so pragmatic career choices. I wasn't about to just jump, kick my boss and leave my job, to explore myself. So My first book did very well. I had self-published it actually. It was rejected by every publisher. Um, and when the second book also did well and my royalty check became more than my salary, I resigned from my job at that time. My
Nice.
last job was at a life insurance company. I was at a CXO level. I used to report to the CEOs, head of marketing, product, service, quality at a life insurance company. So I was a full-time author
Mm.
from 2011 onwards. That was my second career. And then I was called by the Indian government to be a diplomat. Uh, and I never take any political positions. I never comment on politics publicly, but it's an honor to work for your country. I'm a very patriotic person. I love India. So it's an honor to be able to work for your country, to represent your country. So I was
Yeah.
given this role. It's the first time I worked with the government. I became a diplomat. I traveled with that diplomatic passport. I had diplomatic
Mm.
immunity in London, which
Fantastic.
is
Lucky you.
which is
Lucky
not
you.
what Hollywood movies make it out to be. Yeah, but it is still quite cool.
Yeah.
So I was a diplomat for 4 years. I guess that was my third career. And surprisingly, something I started a year and a half back. I was contacted by Discovery TV if I would like to host a documentary program for them. Uh,
Ah.
so I did that. I was in front of the camera, and this was launched around I think a year back, and to my surprise, it became their biggest hit of their India produced programs ever on Discovery India. So I
Wow.
hosted another show for them, and now I'm making another documentary. So that's my fourth career. I'm also a TV
Wow.
documentary host. Mm.
Wow. Incredible. So four incredible careers. I mean, I think the first one pales in significance compared to all the other three, because I think it feels like you found
Banking,
your
and my last job
yeah,
was in life
banking.
insurance. Doesn't get more boring than that.
I know, but it was the only way was up, of course, because you've gone from exercising your creative
Mm,
self
mm,
into practicing it in so
mm,
many different fields in your career,
mm,
from
mm.
cultural and arts, diplomacy. Diplomacy is in itself an art, more than a
Right, right.
science, of course, to a large extent.
Mm.
And I want to talk about each one in a little bit of detail. But before I do so, your most recent output really and brilliance again is your book Idols that you've just
Mm,
launched, in
mm,
fact in October,
mm,
with your sister
mm,
and your elder sister, Bhavna Roy. And I have been studying what you've produced, and it's fascinating that you've done it. And
mm,
as someone who's a British Indian, I have to tell you that my take on what you've done and why you've done it
mm,
is a different one, of course, compared to the indigenous Indian, right?
mm,
Who the youth of India and so on and so forth. But I want to ask you a little bit about this book, just so you can educate all of us and the audience on it. So tell us
It's
about the book Idols.
it's
What's it about?
it's essentially on the concept of idol worshipping, a way of life that was spread throughout the world uh, in ancient times. But there was a tide of history over the
Yeah.
last 2000 years. Many idol worshipping cultures died out. They were killed actually. And India is among the last surviving of the idol worshipping cultures. Uh, Japan's also there, China to
Mm,
an extent, Thailand,
mm,
few. And I'm not against the idol rejecting cultures. They have their point of view, fair enough. Um I'm just what Didi and I tried to do. So in India, we call, for your members who don't know, is rude to call your elders by their name. So you always have a term for them. So Didi is a term for elder sister, or my elder brother, I call him Dada. So yeah.
mm.
What Didi and I, what we wanted to do is explain the philosophies of idol worshipping. Something that the descendants of idol worshipping cultures in the West and the Middle East have forgotten, actually. The Greco-Roman culture was an idol worshipping culture. Pharaonic Egypt was an idol worshipping culture. Gilgamesh, Mesopotamia was an idol worshipping culture. The Celts of the UK were idol worshipping culture. And one of the reasons why I find idol worshipping attractive is it's intuitively liberal. Um, because the philosophical concept at the heart of idol worshipping is that the divine is not a singular male god who exists outside of the universe. Because in that concept, the male god is outside of the universe, and the earth and the universe itself is profane. It's a product of original sin. Um, Whereas in the idol worshipping culture, of course, there is a divine that exists outside of the universe, but it's not male. It's never described as male. It's beyond gender. Uh, but the universe itself is also divine. The earth is also divine. The mountains and the rivers are divine. You and I are divine. That's a key philosophical difference at the heart of idol worshiping. That's why Namaste. I'm sure you know the translation of Namaste, right? Many
Sure.
Westerners
Please
erroneously
tell us.
translate it as
Please tell
hello.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, many Westerners erroneously translate Namaste as hello. It's not actually. The Sanskrit meaning of Namaste is I bow to the divine within you. So with Namaste, I'm recognizing that you have divine within you. And if you see the entire world as divine, if you see all human beings as divine, you become naturally, intuitively liberal. If you see the mountains and the rivers and the trees as divine, you're a natural environmentalist. Um, you're naturally inclusive because whether you're a transgender or whether you're a gay, you have the divine within you as well. Um, uh, there's no concept of judgment because it's not that the gods are above you. The gods are also subject to the same laws of cause and effect as you are. So you make your choices and then live with the consequences. Right? So it makes you intuitively liberal, makes you intuitively inclusive, makes you intuitively environmentalist. It's one of the reasons and this is why I find idol worshipping interesting, and which is why I'm attracted to it. And we wrote this book to just explain because in much of the world, even in many parts of India, the westernized parts of India, the philosophies of idol worshipping have actually been forgotten. In some ways,
Yeah.
people just say, you're so stupid, you're worshipping a stone. You're so stupid, you're worshipping a tree. You're so stupid, you're worshipping a river. It's not stupidity, there's actually deep philosophy behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of your work, I mean, it's pretty important work, I think, given the phase of change that we're in, globally, multi-generationally. And let's start with idols, because it is a topic of debate and discussion. In fact, can be quite controversial when you look at some of the other faiths, and they describe people who are praying to a stone, or Lord
As
Ganesha,
evil or something, yeah.
or as evil. And there are many stories that stem from the black art, black magic, shamanism, and so on. I'm a student of anthropology, and I recall in my Western degree in anthropology at UCL many years ago, there was a whole discussion around totemic belief, pagan belief, and so on and so forth, and it was perceived as being regressive. In fact, it was like, well, it used to be that way because I guess they don't know any better, and then they evolved. It's very developed and so on. I want to throw the ball at you because this is something you talk a lot about, and I think it's very important you bring your perspective here as to just speaking as openly as possible about what really happened and what was the message that many of us have now, in the history books over the last 50, 100, 150, and maybe over 1,000 years, started to make part of our psyche, which needs to be corrected, perhaps.
Because look, at the heart of it is this thing that you cannot worship any graven images outside of that one male god. And because of that, a lot of violence was committed on idol worshippers, because apparently we were worshipping false gods, or even worse, particularly if you were worshipping goddesses, because that was apparently the biggest crime if you worshipped a goddess. So even in India, when the invaders came to India, the worst attacks were actually on the goddess worshippers. Um, uh, we all know what happened to the Vestal Virgins in Rome, for example. So a lot of it is because you don't understand it, so you find it strange, right? Um, like for example, there is Ardhanareshwar in India, which is Lord Shiva and Goddess Parvati are fused into one. So essentially, the murti, the idol, the image is half male, half female.
Right.
Now, there's a lovely story behind it because a devotee of Lord Shiva said that I'll worship only you, not your wife, right? And Lord Shiva was so angry with that. He said, there is no difference between my wife and me. And you'll either worship both of us or you will not come here. And to prove his point, he and his wife essentially they merged. So the left part is Goddess Parvati, his wife, and the right part is Lord Shiva. Now he was teaching a lesson to his devotees. There is no difference between the male and the female. Um, and if you think about it, it's a very beautiful philosophical lesson, right? But if someone comes from London, in the 18th century and sees a murti of a half male, half female, he'll think, oh, these guys are strange. I need to kill them, or convert them. When actually it's a very beautiful philosophical message, right? For example, if you notice in English, when you're writing and you write God, the male God, you'll use a capital G. Do you notice when you write goddess, you use a small g? Have you noticed that? Now
Yeah,
that says something about the culture in which English emerged, right? Male god, true. Goddess, you know. In Sanskrit, which is the ancient Indian language, no difference between the male god or the female goddess. They're both to be respected. No difference between the term for the male god, female goddess, and you, a human being. Same term, twam. It's the same term. Why? Because you have the divine within you as well, right? Now, I find this something very beautiful. Someone else may find it strange, right? Particularly, say, the invaders who came in the 12th, 13th century, or the ones who came now. They may find it strange. The way I see it, look, you don't force your way on me. I'm not forcing my way on you. India and history has been witness that if invaders attacked us, we fought back very hard.
Right.
Many see us as Mahatma Gandhi's people, and we have a pacifist tradition, no doubt. The oldest pacifist tradition in the world is Indian, Jainism. It's the oldest pacifist tradition in the world, going back thousands and thousands of years. But India has a tradition of fighting back as well. That's why we are still around, right? Because our ancestors battled.
Right.
But despite us fighting hard and ensuring the protection of our culture, there's almost no example of Indians sending armies outside the Indian subcontinent to conquer other lands, to convert them or, to kill them. We didn't care. We remained within the Indian subcontinent. It was very rare where we sent armies abroad. Why was that? So these are things to think about because you think about how a society behaves. India suffered invasions for centuries, nearly 1,000 years. 1947, we get independence. The first choice we make is that we will be liberal and secular. Um, and one sees in the West just a few decades of chaos with immigration. Liberalism is already fraying out there. How strong is the liberalism there? And those are the symptoms. I'm saying, what are the philosophies which lead to that kind of society?
Do you think, I mean, this, because when you take Hinduism, I'm going to call it Hinduism, you can call it holy scriptures.
The dharmic religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism.
Yeah.
But I include Indian Islam, Indian Christianity also in it. Even Indian Islam, Indian Christianity are very dharmic in their approach. Sorry, go ahead.
And why do you say that? And what makes you say that?
Actually, just see the surveys. There's a Pew survey. Among the best survey agencies in the world, there was a survey in 2020. It's available on the web, available on their website. They asked Hindus that, do you believe all religions are true? And no surprise, over 90% of Hindus said yes, all religions are true. They were asked, would you worship at the worship places of all faiths? No surprise, they said yes. And you see it in practice. Ajmer Dargah, Muslim tomb of a Muslim Sufi saint, Hindus will worship out there. But the interesting thing was they asked Indian Muslims and Indian Christians, are all religions true? Over 90% said yes. You won't get this response. You'll get a very different response in other countries, right? Over 90, I think nearly 90% of Indian Muslims, Indian Christians said they believed in the concept of dharma and karma, which are actually Hindu Buddhist concepts. They are not Islamic Christian concepts, right? And dharma and karma is, in a way, a very liberal tradition, because the belief is even the gods are subject to the law of dharma and karma. It's not just us human beings. Even the gods are subject. They are not above it. In a way, the rule of law applies to the gods as well, not just us. It's a very liberal concept, in a way. Indian Muslims, Indian Christians also believe it. Sorry, go
And I guess that's a huge part of the cultural makeup of a nation as it's evolved over the last few thousands of years.
Yeah.
Let me go back to your books for a second. I've always been intrigued because you've had 11 books now, and you've sold millions of copies of these books. And you talked about your journey and your various sort of career avatars. Tell us a bit about your research process. I'm intrigued because I guess over time you've honed your talents, your skill, and built mastery. And it's sort of an iterative process. You sell books, you do really well, you're like, wow. Then you do more, you follow a similar formula, then you evolve the formula, and so on. What I find interesting about the work you're doing, which I'm sure the world does too, whoever has come across your work, and I'm sure many will, you're taking very complex aspects of Hinduism and the Puranas, the books, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, Mahabharata. These are highly, firstly, they're thick documents, they're complex documents, they're intellectually enriching, they're not straightforward, they're not binary. They're not binary. Okay, they're definitely not binary. How do you go about conducting research? I know it's probably a long answer, but give us a bit of a clue of how your brain works. How do you do this?
Actually, it's a very short answer. One of the ways to see it is I've been doing research for 48 years, 49 years for these books, because I grew up in a very traditional family where we grew up with these, with the scriptures. I mean, our daily conversations would be on these subjects. My grandfather was a priest was a pandit in Varanasi. He was a teacher. And the joke in our family was we have a lot of blessings of Goddess Saraswati, which is the goddess of knowledge. But Goddess Lakshmi, who's the goddess of wealth, stayed very far away.
I'll agree. My family will agree with that too.
That is the way our family was. So yeah. I just grew up in such a family. So we just knew all our traditions. So all the dharmic religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, we just learned it while growing up. Secondly, in our family, everyone reads a lot. So it just becomes a part of the process of being in our family. If everyone is reading, even you start reading, right? So from a very young age, I've been a voracious reader. All of us are voracious readers. We recommend books to each other. We all have different tastes. And one of the things that we always try and do is try and read books whose basic presumption you may disagree with, because that's how your mind grows. Don't just keep reading books which which reinforce your point of view. So I read at least 5-6 books a month. I've been reading at that pace for decades. That also is research somewhere in the back of the mind. I like traveling, and when I travel, I like to meet different people, learn from them, listen to them. Every person you meet has something to teach you. Keep an open mind, learn, right? So that also is research in the back of the mind somewhere. Now, how all of this emerges into the story, frankly, I don't know. That is, and it's somehow it just emerges. I open the laptop and I can actually see that world, and I describe what I see. And the philosophies in some way just appear in a, and I guess I don't think I take away the complexity of the philosophies, but I put it in a simple way. But I guess I think most people can get it. Uh, yeah.
Was going to say, how much of this ends up being fact, to whatever extent fact is, versus your creativity or fiction or your genius, your visions of
Okay.
what should be and could be.
First of all, I'm very wary of that word genius, and I constantly say that anyone who has that arrogance of, particularly a fiction writer, who has that arrogance of
Yeah.
saying it's my brilliance, it's my creativity is on the path to disaster, uh, it's a blessing. No one can. If any fiction writer is genuinely honest, you can't explain where it comes from. You don't know when the blessing will stop. You don't understand why it started. I wrote no fiction before Models of Melua, before my first book. Nothing. It's a blessing. It's arrogant to say it's my genius. It's a blessing. I'm lucky. Um, Look, how it all comes together. Um, I think if it's a bit like cooking a meal, right? You need to get as many ingredients as you can, because you don't know what's going to go into a story, right? So research as much as you can. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
If you want to cook a paneer do pyaza, you'll need paneer, you need onions, you'll need masala, you need some stuff. But I have no idea what's going to go into the dish, so I need to buy the entire shop, right? And keep it, metaphorically, and keep it somewhere with me. And then when I'm writing, this gets picked, this doesn't. Why? I don't know, right? And it just comes together like that, So I'm explaining something on an incident in War of Lanka, my latest fiction book.
Yeah.
And there's an incident between Lady Shabri and Lord Ram, and uh, explaining a concept on masculinity, right? And what is a positive masculine approach. And for some reason, something I'd read in Isha Upanishad, some 15 years back, just came, and why, I don't know. And I just wrote it, right? That's the way the process works for me. Just research, learn as much as I can. But when I'm writing, be humble and realize, look, it's a blessing. He sends it. I'm a believer, so I believe Lord Shiva sends it. And why he picks it this way, why he picked me for this blessing, I have no idea. Uh, my job is to research as much as I can and try to write every day, be on the laptop. Obviously, the blessing can't come if I'm wasting my time surfing the internet or something. And then it comes. That's it.
When are you in flow? Have you figured out the times, moments?
I'm a morning person.
I see.
10:30, my brain shuts down. I can't do any thinking after that. I sleep early. I'm normally asleep by 10:30. I wake up early, 5:30. Do my yoga, puja, all that. And my writing phase, I'll start writing by 8:39. I always listen to music while writing. The words don't matter. I zone the words out. It's just the mood of the music. And I'm a lover of music. I was the lead singer of a band actually in IIM Calcutta. So I listen to all genres. And it just has to kind of get me into the mood. That's all, right? And I eat tons of cream biscuits while writing for some reason. So
cream biscuits. Okay.
Yeah, the kind we got when I was a kid, in India.
Got it.
So many of those
are your triggers.
Yeah, they are those. So many of my readers know this. So at various lit fests, I have readers who actually come with cream biscuits, give it to me and like, take this and write quicker.
On the flip side, have you had writer's block as well, where you're like, damn, this damn thing's not happening for me? And what do you do at that point? Just for some of the authors out there.
Uh, Never. It's 11 books in 13 years. And my books, are intense, a lot of research, and the
Yeah.
fiction books are kind of relatively long.
Yeah.
Uh, just once, when I was writing Ravan, I had writer's block for a few months. I had a very difficult uh, uh, personal life for 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
The career was going better and better, but lots of lots of losses, lost people, some of them very tragically. And I'm a very family oriented person. When tragedies strike your family, and there's no one to blame except fate, there's what do you do? Um, and Probably the lowest phase of my life when I'd lost my brother-in-law, who was like a father to me, very tragically.
Mm.
Um, and Lost my father a few years after that. But
Mm.
I mean, by that time, so many tragedies had hit us that our entire family, we we were just used to it. We have to manage it.
Yeah.
What to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
But at that phase, it was probably the lowest phase of my life ever. For 2 3 months, because writing was my refuge, and even that had stopped. And I was thinking, how much worse can life get? I mean, if even this stops, what,
Mm.
what the hell do I do?
Mm.
Um, and There was bizarrely some music that just helped. Um, Ashish and I, my twin brother and I, we were watching TV. You know how men are when we are depressed beyond words,
Mm.
we just like to zone out, I guess, because we're not the sort who like to talk or get in touch with your feelings. There's nothing you can do, man. You just have to suffer.
Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
talking about it is
I hear
not
you.
going to. So we were sitting and watching TV, um, and just surfing. I mean, just every 2 seconds, just essentially
Mm.
just and uh, and some channel came up. There was some songs that came. I know why I told Ashi stop, stop, stop. Um, and I just Shazam that song, downloaded it on my Amazon Music app. That evening, I went down for a walk to the park. Um, Normally, I have a playlist. That evening, I don't know why, I just said play. Now, the Amazon Music app does it is if you just randomly say play, it starts with your latest song that you
Mm.
picked.
Mm.
And the first few seconds of that song, I don't know what happened. I just started crying. And I was walking for an hour just listening to those first maybe 25 seconds on loop repeatedly. And I was just
Mm.
crying continuously. And the next 2 3 chapters just came down in a flood. Uh,
Wow.
Went back up and I started writing.
Wow.
Mm.
Trauma is very difficult. I know you've had your fair share of it. I have too, and I recently lost my mother. You lost your dad a couple of years ago, and I've lost both my parents. So when I was much younger, and I've had loads of personal trauma in terms of
Mm.
health, a very dark past.
Mm. Mm.
And I found that, because I'm a musician too, and I found that grief and trauma, as painful as it is, it's the struggle, but that's where the learning is.
Mm.
That's where the learning is. That's
Look,
where the growth.
if you're right, man, muscles grow against resistance.
Yeah.
Uh, I think the modern world, and India is learning this from the West also, sadly. It's all about living a cocooned life, uh, and just chasing the next fix in terms of pleasure, the next brand, the next affair, the next movie, the next. Um, and you'll find that doesn't necessarily lead to a more fulfilled life.
Hmm.
Uh, I've lived in London for 4 years. One of the things that struck me when I met many youngsters in the West, and one feels sad in a way because they are so much more privileged than Indian kids. They're perhaps the most privileged generation in human history.
Right.
Western present Western kids, and yet they are so unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's nothing that they could want materially, which is not available to them. Uh, and yet they are unhappy. And there's one of the things that's spoken of in the Indian tradition is that grief has a purpose, if you can use it.
Right.
Gautam Buddha had said this first of the four noble truths: grief is the fundamental reality of life. You suffer when you don't accept it.
Right.
Um, just accept it. It's not just happening to you; it's happening to everyone. Yeah, everyone suffers.
Mm-hmm.
Some have more, some have less, but no one has a bed of roses. Everyone suffers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you can use that grief to find strength, to find purpose, um, and which should never be about, uh, if your approach can be that what you suffered, others shouldn't suffer. I know it sounds strange, but that was actually that is the dharmic approach. That's what Gautam Buddha said. That's what Adi Shankaracharya said. Gives you a sense of purpose, and you can lead a fulfilling life. It's not just about happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Happiness is there; it's important, but grief is also there. Purpose is also there. Disgust is also there. All these emotions exist for a reason. Maybe you're supposed to experience it all. My
Mm-hmm.
sister and I had written this article in print a few years back, and using a Western example, which your viewers can understand. George R. R. Martin is perhaps from among the luckiest generations in human history, the baby boomers. And, uh, you know, Arey yaar, what's wrong with me? I'm forgetting his name. Lord of the Rings, J.R.R.
Okay.
Tolkien.
Okay.
J.R.R.
Yeah.
Tolkien, perhaps among the unluckiest of Western, right?
Right.
He saw action in the First World War, the Great Depression, Second World War. Man, how much more could his generation suffer?
Mm.
And George R. R. Martin, baby boomer, born after the Second World War, best time for the West, immense wealth, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. He dodged the
Mm.
Vietnam draft as well. They had a great life. Look at the
Mm.
kind of books they wrote.
Mm.
Tolkien's books are about nobility, about purpose, whereas George R. R. Martin's books are, debauched, decadent, everything that could be wrong.
Mm.
And why is that? Does grief give you purpose? Does, like muscles grow against resistance, can your character grow with grief if you're willing to
Yeah.
use it? And
Yeah.
that's actually what the dharmic philosophy is about. Don't wait for God to come and help you. Okay? Because you are God, right? You are divine.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
use what life throws at you and grow with it. And realize
Yeah.
that everyone has moments of happiness. For that, you should be grateful. Everyone has moments of grief. For that, toughen up and manage it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you do that, you lead a fulfilling life.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I want to stay on the same thought for a second because you talked about the generation of young people in the West. It's quite an important point I want to raise with you because I know you have a view on this. So the World Health Organization released a report about a year ago, a damning report on the state of mental well-being on the planet.
Mm,
It was
mm,
quite a depressing report, really, frankly. It's dark and depressing. It's not really something one wants to read. But a couple of statistics that I want to share with you, one of which is that 1 in 3 teenage girls are clinically depressed based
mm.
on who
In the
has
West.
in
Mm,
the West. 1 in 6 adults are clinically depressed or have mental health challenges and
mm,
conditions.
mm.
We in the UK had a loneliness minister, and
Yeah.
we know it's a fundamental problem for us in this country. And we know that individualism is a way of life in the West. It's an ideology we're familiar with versus collectivism, which is more, let's say, in India or the East to a large extent. And that's been discussed and debated, the pros and cons and so on and so forth. But I want to talk to you about, and I want to get your opinion on all of your learnings over all of these scriptures and the debates and the discussions, and you've got to have evolved and developed as a human being manyfold after discovering what you may not have known existed in the past. I mean, with my very small basic understanding of just some of the scriptures, I'm absolutely blown away with just the vast amount of how advanced were those people at that
Traditional
time.
Indian thinking was in terms of how society works, how the human mind works. Look,
Yeah, just
one of the things to understand in the Indian way is
yeah.
this abhorrence for extremism of any kind. There's a lovely Sanskrit Mahavakya, which is Ati Sarvatra Varjayit. Extremism of any kind should be avoided. So, excess individualism is not good. Excess collectivism is also not good. You need to find
Right.
that balance, right? Where you can find your individual spirit. We say every individual is a god. How much more individual can you get?
Mm,
But we are social animals. You need the the support and strength of your family and your community.
mm,
Um, and that is a lesson from the West. Uh, if you destroy all traditions, if you destroy family, if you destroy, I'm not a Christian, but I, go to churches in the UK, and as a Hindu, I feel bad. You know, there was a church which was converted into a discotheque. And on the windows, there was still
mm,
uh, edge glass of Jesus Christ. And I mean, look, I'm a liberal guy, but I'm like, if Jesus Christ is there, there's some things which should not be happening. When
mm,
is
mm,
that? I mean, call
mm,
me, at least that much traditions I have, even if I'm not a Christian, right?
mm,
Um, the value of family, the value of good friends. And trust me, I have seen that in my personal life in the last 7, 8 years. Um, if we have got through, when our entire family suffered, in this last 7, 8 years. My first marriage broke down at the same time. There was just so much
mm,
pressure.
mm,
And unfortunately, my brother-in-law was also in the public space. I was also in the public space. You know, yeah, uh, difficult to plaster a smile in public, and because you don't
mm,
want people, you know, uh, we are private people. We don't like people knowing our grief, right? Um,
It's very
and
personal. Grief is
it is,
very, very
it's
personal.
the way it is.
Very.
But the reason we got through it all, why is actually the strength of our family. Even
Yeah.
my ex-wife and I were still friends because it's not that she did anything or I did anything. The marriage broke down just because of the pressure, I guess.
Mm,
So there was no ugliness because it's not that she or I went you know anywhere. The child is still special to us. It's just, but if the family is essentially strong, if you've got people looking out for each other, you will get through shit, right?
mm,
But if families have broken down, you're alone, you don't know what to do when grief
mm,
hits you, right? Um, and one of the things that Westerners have to realize, one of the things I'm saying in India to many of the youngsters, your social media friends are not your friends, man.
yeah,
Your
absolutely. Yeah.
friends, your the only people who truly matter are your family and your close friends, which is never more than 5, 10 people. Okay, the kind
Right.
of people who will die for you without a second thought, who you will die for without a second thought, those are the only people who matter,
Mm,
right? Everyone, I'm not, the others, have relationships with, have those communities, all that, but I mean, if you keep those key bonds strong, you will get through life. So you need to find that balance as well. Keep space for your individualism, but don't destroy everything. Why are I'd read this report too of teenage girls being depressed, and many of them are
right.
going on Instagram and doing silly things, to
Mm,
get likes, right? To get that dopamine rush. And see,
mm,
internet never forgets, right? 10, 15 years later, they may regret it, right?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but there's no parental pressure. There's no siblings around to kind of
Mm.
give guidance, to help, to support.
I want to take your attention to that because I know you're running out of time. To diversity, equity, inclusion, because that's something very close to my heart. I run an institute around it. And I've heard you talk about how in India, and going back to thousands of years, and all of the work that you've done, the way equality, diversity, feminism is looked at in the East versus the West is very, very different. And you narrate some brilliant stories and examples from the different books, whether it's the Shiva trilogy or the Ramchandra series, or in fact your latest books, War on Lanka, or even Idols. Can you give us a couple of examples? So we want to educate people watching this as to how diversity, equality is actually not a foreign concept of India. In fact, it's very advanced as a civilization in that regard.
One of the things to accept is, look, no society is perfect, right? The question, and no society will ever be perfect. One of the things in the Indian way is often the worst crimes in history have been done by those who actually believe in perfection. That, oh, this is the correct economic theory, everyone else has to be killed. This is the correct way to worship, everyone else has to be killed or converted, right? That moral arrogance often leads to tremendous violence. So no society is perfect, to accept that. You have to keep on constantly trying to improve, right? So our society, for example, there's a lovely line from Lord Ram from the Ramayana, which goes back centuries. Purush napunsak nari va jiva charachar koi sarv bhav bhaja kapata taji mohi param priya soi. That any man, any woman, any transgender, any living being, any plant, any animal, you give up deceit, love each other, come to me, you're my people. And this is a God, Lord Ram. And any transgender, any man, any woman, any transgender, right? As it said centuries ago, it's such an inclusive way. Our oldest scripture is the Rig Veda, right?
Right.
And it has hymns written by women as well, not just men, right? So we had the equivalent of women prophets and messiahs because it was written by rishis. The rishis are the ones who communicate with the divine. So in a way, they're roughly the equivalent of prophets or messiahs. We had women prophets, right? Who wrote in our scriptures, right? Whose hymns are there in our ancient scriptures. We had women who founded universities. We had transgender gods. We had no problems with LGBTs in ancient times. Now, but we also understood that a large part of this is about choices because at times things are in conflict. Then what do you do? What if inclusion and equality are in conflict? Then what do you do? Right? And there are stories which discuss this debate, right? So then what's the best way out? Because, and the only way you can discuss this is when you realize there is actually no perfection, right? And everything is actually about choices, and you find the best way to carry as many along as you can. And this is all there in our stories, which is what I try and bring across in my books. And I think that's a much more stable way to drive inclusiveness and diversity as compared to uh, what at times can appear in the West as an elite project just trying to hammer it down. That doesn't work. In the Indian way, there was never an approach that this is the word of God, you have to follow it, right? Because there was no concept of blasphemy in ancient India. So you could question God as well, right? At the end of the Mahabharata, a human being questions and curses God, Lord Krishna. And Lord Krishna doesn't punish that human being. She's an old woman, right? He doesn't punish that human being saying, how dare you, this is blasphemy. He actually accepts that, yes, mother, I have done something wrong. Even if I was forced to do it, I will accept your curse. A human being cursed God. Right? That was our way. So, which means if you want to cause change, how do you do it? You have to do it the hard way. Go place to place, debate, speak with complete freedom of expression, and convince people. It's a harder way, but it creates much more lasting change. That has always been the Indian way, which is why you find uh, India is still so intuitively liberal, even after centuries of invasions. Right? There are some who say that India became liberal and secular in 1947 because there was a anglicized elite in Delhi which enforced that. Okay,
Mhm.
I don't buy that
Mhm.
argument because that same anglicized elite wanted to enforce English and Hindi as the common language across India. I'm sure you're aware that didn't work out too well,
No,
right?
no.
It didn't work out too well at all. Indians are a rebellious people. If we don't want to
Yeah.
accept something, we won't give a shit what the elite says. We'll not accept it. That
Mm.
language policy did not go down well at all. The elite was forced to step back. Every
Mm.
state has its own. In fact, many states have two, three languages. And
Mm.
the elite in Delhi was forced to accept 22 official languages. Right. So
Mm.
if the elite wanted to push something, it doesn't mean it would get accepted. But when the founding fathers said we will be liberal and secular, the people said yes, this is our natural way. Right. But our definition of secularism is different. It's not
Right.
about separation of church and state. It's about equal respect for all religions.
Mm. Mm.
Um, so that to me is a lesson for diversity and inclusiveness from India.
Yeah,
Um,
you find today one of the challenges is that the common leader. Let's take work environments in India and abroad. The leader today who is doing DEI well or not doing it well has their own ideas. Some of them are not as progressive in their thinking. Let's be honest. What you're saying is fantastic, and I'm a liberal too, and I get it. I'm so bought into what you're saying, and maybe the 7 million people who read your books are too. But they're not. We don't have Amish omnipresent yet, or you are not the essentially, unfortunately, the champion. You're not the pundit. You're not the millions and millions of pundits who are probably saying the wrong thing. Let's be frank about it, and giving the wrong messages. How do you feel about that? And what happens between you and them? I'm always intrigued. Like you bump into them in a lift. Are they like, oh, what fantastic piece of work, Amisha, real good stuff, buddy? Or are they
yeah,
like, God, you're a
yeah, and
nightmare.
respectful debates, which is the
Yeah,
completely Indian way. And
yeah,
the way I see it, I should listen to them with an open mind. Someone who's has a different approach, has a conservative approach, I should listen to them with an open mind. And the Indian way, they debate with me, and it's very polite. Um, my books are not just in English; they're in 20 languages. Done
right.
well in Hindi, Tamil, so it's not really a secret in India.
Mm,
Um, but to me, uh, that's what makes me proud of our culture, that
mm,
we can have these debates in a calm, rational way. If you think about it,
yeah,
in ancient times, there was no caste system the way it is. Dr. Ambedkar himself wrote of it,
right.
and that it became this way, the present caste system that's there around 1500 years ago. Um, the Indian state, with the support of the Indian people who've been voting for it, has implemented the largest affirmative action program in the history of humanity in the last 75 years. Um, and, there's been practically no violence. There's been, it's been completely, it shows that Indians are, if you're willing to put a point of view across, they're willing to listen. The main thing that I would advise though is be willing to listen to someone who doesn't agree with, like, for example, I support inclusion and diversity. Now someone says no, I don't. Fair enough, I will hear you, you hear me.
Yeah,
And to
yeah.
me that is true liberalism, uh, with freedom of expression, with politeness, the value of good manners, that has also been forgotten,
Mm,
in the modern
mm,
day. There's a lovely Sanskrit line, Satyam Bruat Priyam Bruat Na Bruat Satyam Apriyam, that speak the truth, but speak it with love. If you cannot speak it with love, then stay silent. It doesn't say speak the untruth. Stay
mm,
silent, wait for the right time, then speak it, but speak it with love. It's a value of good manners, and this is one of the key rules of samvad, of debate, in ancient India.
mm,
Um, Words can cut deeper than a knife. Uh, often that's not realized, and if you speak with manners, you'll be surprised how much the other guy will be willing to listen to you. And keep an open mind. You might just learn something from the other guy as well. Goddess
Yeah,
Saraswati is
beautifully
the
put.
goddess of knowledge, can bless anyone. So keep an open mind and listen.
Yeah, beautifully
That's
put.
the way
I
to
know
go.
you have I know you have to run, but just final bit here really is India. I know you say you're an India boy and you love your country and you're absolutely, committed to its betterment. Two scenarios.
Hmm.
One is an India that you are just ultra proud of over the course of the next decade, let's just say. Uh, Tell me what makes that India great. That's one scenario. And the second scenario is what is the most worrying aspect of the future of India that really concerns you and you are nervous and potentially very worried about?
Hmm. Um, Look, I think for any patriot, love for the country has to be a given. But that doesn't mean you agree with everything that the country does, right? Uh, so my siblings love me. That doesn't mean they agree with everything I do. But the way my siblings will give suggestions to me will be very different from how someone who doesn't like me will talk to me about my areas of improvement, right? So there are things that I deeply love about India. That after many centuries, we are rising once again, particularly post 1991. And credit must be given to politicians across all parties. It's the economic
Right.
growth that's happening. Um, and in this, the pace of change that has happened in the last 30 years, the fact that we are still relatively quite stable. Per capita violence in India is actually among the lowest quartile in India. Remember, India is more a continent than a country. There are more people in India than all of North America, Europe, and the Gulf states combined. We
Yeah.
have more languages than all these regions combined. So whenever you look at data in India, you have to divide by the population. We're a continent. India and China
Right.
are continents more than countries, right? Uh, so those are the things that I'm proud of. That in many ways we are growing, developing. People from the bottom structure of society are coming to power in movies, in industries, in politics. Scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, former untouchables, had presidents, prime ministers, chief
Mm,
ministers, are powerful. This is very good, right? These things are good. The fear is when change happens too fast and money comes too quickly.
mm,
Will we lose our culture? That is a fear. Um, are we perfect? Of course not. But if we don't lose our culture, if we don't get over westernized, because my fear with over westernization is the West tends to swing on extremes from one extreme to the other. First,
right.
no rights for women, then swing on the other extreme where feminism means hating all men, then again
Mm,
swing to the other extreme, then again swing to the other extreme. You know, and that's not India's style. India's style was always about finding the balance.
mm,
That to me is a critical part. Let's see, it's going to be a very interesting decade because the
yeah.
pace of change that's happening at our scale, it's happened only in China before, and China has had many issues with it.
Mm,
So let's see. It's going to be an
mm.
interesting decade.
Under the pretext of India's democracy, because it's a
Yeah,
different
yeah.
type of democracy.
So,
Obviously,
but
it's not the
listen, but
Western
we
democracy.
cannot we cannot work in any other way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I have a lot of respect for Indian politicians across all parties. We're a damn difficult country to manage.
Very. Very.
Uh, we are really rebellious. Uh, you know, just the vast scale of India. An average MP in India handles more people than the prime ministers of most countries.
Right.
It is an insane level of complexity. Indian politicians work 7 days a week, 15, 16 hours a day. They have to be
Mm,
on call all the bloody time. They're a very difficult. I have respect for Indian politicians across all parties. And they're forced to always be available, always, we are not an easy country to manage. We are very, very tough. Our people are very rebellious. They somehow manage it. So I have respect for them.
Yeah, incredible. And the work that you're doing and the books that you're writing, keep writing them, please, because it is making a difference to people outside of your success and brilliance. I think, I'm certainly in my community, we have 50,000 folks here. A lot of them are executives, by the way, and academics in the West. So many of them will know you. Many of them may not know you, but now will, of course, and certainly read your texts and your books. And we'll put all of the details of your website and everything else in the description. Before I go, you're going to turn 50 soon at some point. You're still fine. At some point you will. And have you got some big milestones that you've set for yourself for your half a century?
I used to think of those things earlier, but I know it might sound pessimistic, but actually it's optimistic. All that I've suffered in the personal life over the last 7-8 years, I've realized, man, enjoy each day. Yeah? We have my family around. Focus on work. I know it sounds very syrupy, but trust me, man, when you've suffered so much, you realize
I hear you.
that is what truly matters, man. Those goals and all wo hota rahega,
I totally
I'm a hardworking guy. I will achieve stuff, but but that's not important, man.
I love your humility, and
it's the
listen,
family.
go back to your music, and one day we'll jam together. One day we'll jam together. If you come to London next, or I go to Mumbai, we're going to jam together. We're going to make sure we promote the book Idols. We can't get hold of the copy yet in the UK, right? Yes. It's only in India right now.
Yeah, so all other books are available in the UK. Idols will be available, I think, from February onwards. But my previous books are all available. War of Lanka, all of them are available.
Amazing. Okay,
great. HarperCollins is my publisher. Idols from February.
Okay, and I'm going to try and get my signed copy from you somehow, and that would be amazing. Thank you so much, Amish Tripathi. What a wonderful guy. God bless you. God bless your family, and stay happy, stay healthy, stay calm, and keep smashing it, man. And thank you for coming on my show. I'm deeply grateful.
Thanks, Saif. You take care, my friend.
Have a good evening. Be well. Cheers. Bye.